we're disrupting a £350 billion global market. It was an hour call of him just roasting and berating both me personally and the technology. You know nothing. It's all learning on the job. They don't teach you this at university. They don't teach you this anywhere. It's a massive numbers game. So 70 investors all said no bar one, but you only need that one to say yes. So I bumped into again, and then we kind of continued the conversation. He said, hey, again, really liked your pitch. Make sure you send me a pitch deck. Fine. So then again, didn't think anything would happen with it. We then ended up sitting next to each other again on the plane. So we kind of hired a bunch of people, all terrible hires, burnt through the money really, really quickly. But it was the first kind of piece of return that we thought we could do something with, and it gave us inspiration and motivation that we can take.
Hello, and welcome to Kasa Connect. Together we're exploring the journeys of entrepreneurs, creatives, and changemakers. Today's guest is an award-winning innovator. I'm so proud to introduce to you Aalok, who's won the Mayor of London's Entrepreneur Award, MIT's Under 24's Innovator Award, and is CEO of the company upLYFT. Aalok is going to share today on this episode not just his successes, but the challenges too, so we can all learn from it and feel inspired and keep building together. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's connect.
I think I want to start by saying how we actually met. It was at a pitch competition where he was pitching his company upLYFT. And I was actually not pitching Kasa. I was pitching a cure for erectile dysfunction at this competition. But his pitch, as soon as he delivered it, fully stood out. And I knew he'd be winner, and he was. So that was super cool. And because of your amazing pitching skills, I'm actually going to have you do an elevator pitch for us right now.
So super quick. upLYFT is my company. We're creating novel wearable technology that monitors movement as a biomarker. So currently wearable technologies such as the Apple Watch or Whoop look at standard metrics like sleep, oxygenation and heart rate, but there's very little you can do with that. We're using movement as a novel biomarker to use AI with that to predict and proactively understand injuries, musculoskeletal injuries before they occur. So we're disrupting a £350 billion global market, and this is segmented into two main players. We have performance athletes who are looking to really optimize performance and reduce injury risk, but also the geriatric and elderly population where we're trying to prevent things such as falls and understand neurological conditions before they occur.
Wow, that was good. I hope you guys got a sense of exactly what the company does from there. And how did you get into this?
Yeah, so a bit about my background. So I did engineering at Imperial, so biomedical engineering. I've always been really interested in the wearable technology field. And in my final year, we worked on wearable technology for kind of stroke and muscular dystrophies. But then after that, I've always wanted to kind of not stay in research. I really wanted to do my own startup. So I entered like a student incubator, and I had this kind of idea of how we can use sensing and understand sensing as a new technology that can really augment function. And by augmenting function, it really means improving someone's performance. And then in terms of form factors, I understand that a lot of people have rings and Apple Watches, but they only really focus on one main area. So I thought, clothing, everyone wears that. It's like a second skin. Could clothing be used as kind of a new novel approach to really improve your whole body function, as it covers basically most of your body? So kind of putting two together, that's kind of how we stumbled across this kind of area. And then after innovating and developing the technology, we pivoted many times. It kind of ended up to what we have now.
So you say we, so you had a co-founder?
Yes. So when we first started, we founded it with another co-founder. So she was from UCL also, so all based in London. And I think having a co-founder when you start is probably a good idea, because doing a startup when you're young and you have no experience is a super kind of stressful, can be lonely kind of path, because you don't know what you're doing. But like anything, a co-founding relationship is literally probably a bigger relationship than you have with like a romantic partner.
I completely agree.
Yeah. Yes. So you really have to know that person well, understand the complementary strengths. Unfortunately, it didn't work out with both of us. So she parted ways around like a year and a half ago, and I continued running it. But I think that's all part of the process. I mean, people join things, they try things, it works, great. If it doesn't, then so be it. But I think as long as you know what you're getting yourself into and having the correct knowledge of that process, I think that's very important to mitigate your risks.
Yeah, and how do you feel now working on it as a solo founder?
I really enjoy it. I mean, so we've built a really strong team now, kind of around the areas that I have weaknesses in. So now we've got a team of 5, including me. And it's a highly technical team because obviously what we're doing crosses 3 main areas. We have novel textiles, we have AI, and we have hardware. Each one of these areas is kind of a whole company in itself, could be. So we've tried to keep the team really lean, really, really technical. But I really, really enjoy it. I think some people prefer co-founding relationships. I think doing it solo kind of works best for me. But what I really would say is if anyone's looking to do a startup with someone, really understand all the nitty gritty behind it, understand like co-founding agreements, vesting schedules, and understanding kind of what a good leaver and a bad leaver is, because that would save a lot of headache if anything happens.
Yeah. I know you mentioned to me that it's really important to have a contract in case someone wanted to exit, because that's one of the challenges you faced.
Yeah, so it's super important. I think you never know kind of what will happen when you're starting this out. So I think a lot of the headache can be solved by having good contracts in place. So vesting agreements. So vesting agreement is basically a process where if you have equity in the company, so say you're 50-50 or 40-60, your co-founders don't have all the equity straight away. So it might vest, or each co-founder will get the equity over a period of time. And I think that's really important because then it means if someone leaves, they won't want to leave with the whole chunk. If they have 40% straight up, then that's a lot of the company that goes, and that will really hamper your ability to raise funding going forward. Another one is then also having like a good co-founding kind of contract, which really outlines what like a good leaver and a bad leaver is. So have they done something that really harmed the company? If they've done something that harmed the company, well, that means then they don't necessarily keep the equity, or you have the option to buy it back. If they're a good leaver, then okay, then everything's fine. They get to leave with whatever's outlined. And I think this is really, really crucial, because if there's a lot of ambiguity and you don't know and you don't have this outlined before and you don't have that discussion, it can cause a bit of headaches. And I think that's where we were when we first did it, because obviously when we started the company, we were both in uni. So we were uni students, we were super naive. We kind of said, all right, this is going to be amazing. Nothing's ever going to happen. So we kind of went straight into it. But then unfortunately when something did happen, I think the process would have been made a lot easier if we had everything in order. And I think when I was going around trying to deal with this, I spoke to various people and they said, do you have X, Y, Z in place? I said, no. And then it becomes a lot harder, I think, to deal with. So definitely, if anyone's looking to get a co-founding relationship, you need to have that in place.
Did you not have X, Y, and Z in place because you just didn't know about it? Or did you not see it growing to be such a great big company? Was it just like a little research project at uni?
So I would say both. You always have aspirations to try and make it big, but I mean, when you're in university in 4th year, especially when you're doing like a STEM degree, you always have other options of going to like consulting or finance or banking or whatever. So you kind of do this as if it goes well, it goes well. But then secondly, like I said, we were very naive. This was like the first startup we did, the first venture you did. And it's basically, nothing. It's all learning on the job. They don't teach you this at university. They don't teach you this anywhere. So we did have some good mentors around us and advisors. But I think it's also the founder's job and role to ask questions but it's often hard to ask questions that we don't know, right? So it's kind of just a process of we don't know a lot, but we'll kind of run with it. If things happen, we'll learn, and it's all a good process.
And there's a question that I had about equity splits. Would you always recommend that someone should have a majority, or do you think of a 50-50 split?
No, 100%. So generally, there's generally good splits to have depending on how many co-founders you have. I would personally think that 50-50 is quite a bad idea, because if you're both 50-50, no one can pass a resolution or no one can outvote. So if you kind of deadlock, then there's nothing really you can do. So if you're like a co-founder, there's two co-founders. Generally, the CEO will have the majority. That might be like a 60-40 or a 70-30. And then anything beyond 2, it all really depends on how much value they're bringing to the company, right? What their role is. If it's like an amazing CTO that's developing all the product, you value their input highly, so they should be quite high. But then if it starts to get to 4 or 5 co-founders, then it can be a bit problematic because it's very hard for them to justify high equity and having a good amount of input.
So obviously for you, the co-founder split was a little bump in the journey, but you've also had a lot of wins. And I know a big win recently, right? You just raised a lot of funding. So can you tell us more about the process of that?
Yeah, so I mean, that was kind of fed directly off the back of the co-founder split. So that happened around last year, Jan. So after the co-founder split, it was basically the whole vision was continue the company, make sure we don't stop. So the main thing to do with that was then fundraising, because obviously now we need money to keep expanding the team and grow the technology. So then in April, we got invited out to a pitching competition in Munich. So this was run by an organization called the Wearable Technologies AG. So it's a German organization, the world leaders basically for bringing together a lot of the wearable technologies around the world. So we went over there, we flew out there, and then we delivered a pitch. A lot of the companies were way more advanced than we were. So we were super young. We just went through a co-founder split. Yeah. We had no product. So the pitch went well, but I didn't expect anything out of it. Yeah. Luckily enough, an investor approached to us and he kind of kickstarted the conversation saying, I love what you're doing. Are you guys raising? And whenever an investor asks you if you're raising, you always say yes. But although we had it in the back of the mind, we weren't investor ready. We didn't have anything kind of formulated in terms of the strategy. So I said, we're raising, we're ready, we're raising. I just plucked out a number in my head saying we're raising this much.
What was the number?
So that was, at that time, was 400,000. Okay. So it picked it out of my head based on nothing, which is a bad thing to do. So then I thought nothing of it. So then went on with the rest of our days. And then luckily he was from the UK. So then I met him again in the airport, back to London.
By chance.
So bumped into again, and then we kind of continued the conversation. He said, hey, again, really liked your pitch. Make sure you send me a pitch deck. Fine. So then again, didn't think anything would happen of it. We then ended up sitting next to each other again on the plane.
Wow.
And then we then we really started talking. And then, that was like a 1.5 hour journey, 2 hour journey from Germany to London, really going into all the detail of what our technology, the vision of the technology, because at that point we didn't have a lot of the technology ready. So what he was really betting on was where the technology was going to go and myself to deliver on this vision and execute it. So to cut a long story short, he was basically the European director of a very large entity in Hong Kong. They're a manufacturing entity, a corporate, and they manufacture for really big players such as Apple, Facebook, like the Apple Watch, the Vision Pro, the iPhone chips. So they're looking to make some investments in Europe. So we were their second investment. So then he helps me get investor ready, helps build our data room, our pitch deck, the financials, the business plan. So this takes like April all the way to like September. So it's a long process to get everything ready. And this is like hyper minutiae detail, making sure that everything is tip top. So then after all that was all ready, then we pitched the CEO of the company in August. He was on board, he loved it. So then they would come in for half of the round. Then he essentially said, okay, if you want this to happen, you need to find another investor. So then this was the second hurdle.
Okay.
So then we had to go through months and months and months, all the way from June actually is when we first started that. So June all the way through to like November time, October time, fundraising. Probably spoke to around 70 investors in total.
Oh, wow. That's a lot. But I think everyone goes through that, right? It is the process.
It's a massive numbers game. Yeah. So 70 investors all said no bar one, but you only need that one to say yes. And these weren't kind of soft no's. These were like very, very hard. Like, you suck, your technology.
What was the worst conversation you had?
So I had one with, I won't obviously say the VC name, but we had one that was a introduction from an organization in the UK. So because it was an introduction, I thought it would go well. Yeah. But it was an hour call of him just roasting and berating both me personally and the technology. Personally, like
100%. As a CEO, being like, you can't handle this.
Exactly. Oh, wow, so it was very intense.
How do you pick yourself back up from that? Because obviously you did.
Honestly, there was like a moment of PTSD because I did not take another investor call for the next 3 days. And at that process, you're kind of taking at least 3, 4, 5 a day. Yeah. So I kind of paused all of them, but I kind of did the process very analytically. So every no I would get, I would really try and analyze, okay, what pitch deck did I send him? What data room did I send him? What things did they not like? So I would really try and score it and use as much data in order to improve it for the next pitch to the next investor. So one good kind of strategy that we had and what we did is that we didn't pitch to a bunch of investors all in once. We kind of did it in batches. So by batching them, you can kind of iterate your offering and articulate what you're doing and then tweak it. So although he roasted and there's a lot to pick out of that, I still tried to get some use out of it. And turns out I actually did meet him 5 weeks ago at another event after just before we closed. And he actually wanted to work together on something. So it kind of went full circle.
And how did that conversation go? Were you
Politely
very forgiving?
I politely declined, but I politely did it just to,
No, that's always
maintain that
the
professional.
way, of course. And did you celebrate? I mean, after winning, so like getting funding through finally, I hope you celebrated because I know you're the kind of person who's just work.
Yeah, so I'm trying to be better on that. So we're actually planning to do kind of like a pop-up celebration, which we're actually looking to do here, which would be pretty cool. I mean, this is a great space. It's in central London.
Thank you. That would be sick. Let's organize it.
Yeah, for sure. But I think that's celebrating the wins is such a major thing.
So you agree that you must celebrate
100%.
the wins? Okay.
100%.
Small wins or just big ones?
I think the process is so long that I think it would be difficult to celebrate all the small wins. But I think definitely if you achieve something big like, a funding milestone or like a revenue milestone or like a big technology breakthrough, I think definitely celebrate those because otherwise it's kind of like a treadmill. You keep on going and you don't stop.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And what would you say has been the biggest challenge out of your whole journey that you've been through so far? Has it been the funding or is there like something else you found challenging with the build or
I think
team building?
So luckily I come from a technical background, so because I did engineering, I have a fairly good grip on what the technology is and what it's got to do. And that also helps me build a team around that because I understand what needs to be done. I would say definitely the fundraising. Like I said, it takes like 70, we spoke to 70 different investors over a months and months period. And that was just getting the yes. And after you get the yes, you actually have to close it. So then people think when you get all the commitments, it's plain sailing. But it then took us another 3 to 4 months after getting all the commitments to close. And that was like a horrible experience because I actually said no to an investor. So I turned down an investor just for another investor to drag their feet. So it was just a bit, that was a bit of a process. The second one also I think is if you're quite young in this space, investors and other people can maybe look at you in a type of way, which I don't think is always warranted.
I felt that when opening Kasa for sure. 100%. I think when I was going to builders saying this is my plan to turn this, there was dog groomers before into a cafe. They looked at me like I was crazy with all the planning permissions and everything. But look, it happens. So young people can be successful entrepreneurs.
Exactly. 100%. I think a lot of it also is survivorship bias. I think you look at entrepreneurs and the really big ones were young when they started. But I think what people don't realize is they were the very select few or all the young ones that actually did well. So it is difficult to be young and successful in a startup. But I think when you're young, you have a lot of passion and energy, which I think when you get older, you lose. I think there's pros and cons.
That's true. So I actually read a LinkedIn post recently that said that the best way to find funding is through introductions to investors. I know you found yours through an introduction as well. Was that right? Or was it? So we spoke out to around 70 odd investors. So we built like a long list, an Excel spreadsheet of all the different investors. And was that through research or mainly through like asking people and finding introductions?
Both. So the best way I think to go about it is speaking to other founders that are in the same kind of niche and who have raised before because they would have already done this. So if they're very nice, they'll send you their list. Then you have it already built out for you. But if not, they'll put you into contact with maybe at least 5 VCs plus an intro that they can help you with. Then the rest is just research. I mean, going online, LinkedIn, looking at other companies that have raised that you might not know. So things like PitchBook is really good at looking at tangential competitors. And then you just want to break it down to like VCs or investors that you really want to have on board. some that are kind of mid-level that you would like, and then the lower ones which you kind of want to test on first.
Yeah, no, makes sense. That's really good advice. And would you be happy to share your list?
Yeah, if anyone's in the health tech, wellness, wearable space.
Put you on the spot there.
Yeah, no
but I know you're a kind person.
No problem.
And so obviously you have to really believe in your product to be doing this. When did you get your aha moment? Like, this is it, I am gonna for it.
Probably actually the first time we won like a grant, which is like a funny thing. So we won our first grant actually when we were in uni. So it was like a £50,000 grant. So it was like a small grant, but at that point when you're in uni, like £50,000 is like, that's like a decent amount of money back then. So we're like, okay, this is something maybe we could actually do. So we kind of hired a bunch of people, all terrible hires, burnt through the money really, really quickly. But it was the first kind of piece of return that we thought we could do something with, and it gave us inspiration and motivation that we can take this. That plus speaking with kind of users, because that's also ultimately why you do this.
Yeah.
When you speak to people that really understand the problem that we're solving and they resonate with it, and they find use and it makes their lives easier, I think that's the best thing.
Amazing. And if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
Probably another company, I would say so.
Okay, so you are committed to the founder's
100%.
journey. I love that.
Definitely.
And what books, because I know you read a lot, so which book would you say that every entrepreneur should read?
I'll give you 3. So 0 to 1, which is like the startup holy grail. Another one's called The Lean Startup, which again is really good. And the third one is called Build, by Tony Fadell. He was one of the head of products of Apple. And I think this is especially for people that do hardware and product-based companies. Goes into a lot of the fundamentals, but 0 to 1 and Lean Startup are basically the holy grail in kind of what you want to follow in terms of vision and execution and plan.
In terms of vision, is your end goal to sell?
Well, I think investors expect an exit kind of in that 5 to 7 period. But I think right now I'm having just so much fun and kind of building this and seeing where we can take it. But I mean, there's definitely big industry players in this market, which would definitely look to acquire. But who knows? I mean, we're still early on with this.
Was there at any point in your journey where you felt like, okay, I don't really want to do this anymore. It's too difficult. There's too many hurdles. You know, I'm just going to try and get a stable career in like consulting or like something else.
No, I think once after I graduated after uni, and then after we kind of had that co-founder break, I was like, okay, we're 100% going to do this. Because I think when you play this kind of game, you have to play to win. I think you can't play with the idea that you have a backup.
Yeah.
That's also one of the reasons why after I graduated, I went straight into this and didn't take like another job, because I think consulting, banking, finance, they have amazing salaries.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it'll be very difficult then to come out of that and then go into a startup.
You.
Exactly. So kind of with this, you play to win. So you're either all in it and you need to have that confidence that you're going to do well, even though there'll be hurdles. Yeah. But also I think having the right team around you to also kind of, no pun intended, but to uplift you and keep you kind of excited about it. There are days where like it's a bit of a process and a bit arduous, but then I speak to our engineering team and they've had like amazing breakthroughs, and that kind of makes me excited again. So I think that's also like a beautiful thing about it.
I love that. And I love the resilience, because even after the 70 no's, to still believe in your product and still keep going is just a beautiful thing. And you wouldn't be here if you didn't do that.
Yeah, 100%.
Confidence and resilience, super, super important when you're an entrepreneur. Did you always want to be an entrepreneur? Did you go into uni thinking, I'm going to have my own business? Or was it more like exploring around?
No, so the reason why I did engineering and I went to Imperial specifically was to do a startup. I mean, I think they do more spin outs than Oxford and Cambridge combined. Apparently that's a statistic that I've heard that they've kind of quoted. So they have a great ecosystem to kind of kickstart the process. So setting yourself up for success is kind of why I did that. And I think engineering is also good because it teaches you that problem solving, which all entrepreneurs need to do.
Yeah, for sure. And where do you see this going now? And what's the next 6 months looking like?
Yeah, so the next 6 months is big targets. So we're just moving into our own office space now, which is kind of like the R&D hub and facility. And then we are doing a bunch of pop-up events in summer where we're partnering with a bunch of run clubs, because our first users are runners, where we're basically offering our technology to these runners to get free body scans on their biomechanics and their gaits. So they can come to us and they can see, okay, I've got imbalances or asymmetries when I run. They can understand their efficiencies, understand things like loading, and also like power production. And the idea of this is really to get the word out and get people excited by what we're doing. Then ultimately we have a bunch of kind of revenue goals now that we have investors. They're really caring about growing it now.
Of course.
So it's really drilling down those metrics, making sure that we're growing and we're setting ourselves up for the next round that we now need to start thinking about also. It doesn't stop.
Of course, wow. You do have a lot on your plate.
Yeah.
I want to know what a day in your life's like.
Yeah, so I'm very kind of set in my routine. So I'm like a very routine oriented person, which I think everyone who does kind of startups is, because so normally wake up around 7:30 now. So we have international partners. So our investors are based in Hong Kong and we're working with Japanese partners. So they often want to meet in the morning to kind of go through updates. Then it's kind of work kind of all the way through to kind of like 9:30, 10 on most days.
Wow, late.
Yeah. So that's kind of meetings with the team, speaking with kind of stakeholders, catching up with investors and all that kind of stuff. Then I'm a really big believer in gym, and not just to kind of look good or whatever, but it's also really good for like your mental space to really kind of get some time away. So normal gym is around kind of like 10, 11 till midnight, and then get back, eat, and then a bit more work and sleep. So it's like that. Day in,
So
day
we
out.
can't say that you've got a work-life balance at all.
No, not at all. And I think that is probably the main sacrifice I think that you'll have to do at the early stages of this, because also it is your sole responsibility as the founder and CEO to drive the company forward. If you don't hit those milestones, those KPIs that you set to your investors, then they'll start getting anxious.
Yeah, but do be careful of burnout. I don't know if you felt close to one yet or not, or you're still like touch wood, good to go.
Yeah, I think burnout is a big issue, but I think I've tried to mitigate it just by making sure that once I'm done with the work, I'm really having that kind of gym and having that time off. Yeah. But I also really love what I do. And I think that's a big help. Otherwise, it'll be difficult.
Yeah, no, we spoke about this on another episode. Passion is really important when you're starting off. So I'm glad you agree as well. So just to close off, our last 3 questions. I mean, we are filming at a cafe, which is what makes this podcast super unique. So what's your go-to drink on a coffee break?
So if I'm just working, it'll be either a mocha or a cappuccino.
Okay, nice.
Or if I'm about to work out, it'll be a double espresso.
I like that.
Yeah.
3 drinks.
Yeah.
And what's the best piece of advice that you regret not taking?
Yeah. I have a tendency to ignore a lot of advice.
You can say none if you feel like you always made the right decision.
No, definitely not. I definitely don't. I think the first one and the main piece of advice that I think I wish I didn't ignore was, they always say start fundraising way before you need the money.
Okay.
And that's a crucial bit of advice. So say you're running out of money and you're running away 6 months, that is when you want to start. Because if you leave it kind of a month or 2 or 3 months before, then you're fundraising out of panic, and investors see that signal, and then also you'll be pushed into negotiations and contracts that are non-favorable for you. And we're definitely doing that now. So now we've literally just closed the round a month ago. We're now looking to raise again in the next 6 months to start that process, which is way before we need to, but it's just listen to the advice. These people have done it before.
That is good advice.
So I'm like, okay, that's great advice. I'll do it.
Amazing. And this podcast is also all about connections.
Yeah.
So how can our audience connect with you and get in touch if they're interested in learning more or want to just be involved?
Yeah, sure. So we have, we got a website. So it's www.upLYFTwearables.com. So upLYFT is UPLYFT.
Flexing the new merch.
Yeah, got some new merch. But what we're really trying to look for are a lot of athletes and runners right now. So we're working with the athletic population, specifically runners, to test our product. So the marathon, I believe, was just today.
Yeah.
So if you're like a marathon runner or you do 5, 10Ks often, definitely reach out, because we'd love to work with you, help test our product, collect some real world data. And I think it's just a cool piece of technology that I think a lot of people are getting excited about.
I'm really excited about it. I mean, I'm not a marathon runner. I'll say yet, because I am training for the half. I've just started. So if I can try it, I'd love to.
100%,
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on this, and hopefully I'll see you soon.
Thank you.